Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Bandwidth Tapes. I'm Brad Williams. On today's episode, it is an honor to get to talk with someone who has been just a musical hero of mine for most of my life, and someone that I actually have a personal connection with because we worked together many years ago. Today's guest is the incredible performer, producer, and composer, Mr. Matt Rawlings. Back in the 80s, when I was a kid, I recorded a solo album in Nashville, and Matt actually played piano on 5 of the 10 tunes. So we talk about that time in our lives and where he was in his career and just that experience that left such a mark on me. We also talk a lot about his years working with the amazing Mr. Lyle Lovett and just composing and crafting some of those beautiful piano parts that he played, and just the role of a piano player as a rhythm player playing between the lyric, just an incredible masterclass of being a performer and a listener. We talk about his solo projects and just that creative spirit that's made him who he is as one of the most in demand players and producers in the music industry. It's a really personal conversation for me, and it really meant a lot to get to talk with him. So let's do it. So here's my conversation with the incredible Mr. Matt Rawlings. Well, good afternoon, Matt. How are you today?
I am very well, Brad. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to hang out with you this afternoon. We crossed paths many years ago for a few hours, and I will stroll down memory lane with you about that.
Great.
But more importantly, I'm excited to talk about your incredible career. And as I was getting ready to get on here today, I was thinking about my dad, who I lost December of 23, and he would just be over the moon that I'm talking to you today. He was a great piano player, came from that Floyd Kramer Slipnote school,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
was a big fan of your playing. So
Well,
this is a cool moment.
that's lovely, and I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. What can I ask what day he died in December?
December 8th,
Okay. My dad died December 15th, 1987. But
1987. Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah, it's was your dad a music guy?
my dad, that's a tricky question. My dad was sang in college, and he came up in the era of like the Four Freshmen and Barbershop Quartet, and so I think he was musical. He was an attorney, a corporate attorney, and I never once, my whole while he lived, heard him play or sing music. My mom, on the other hand, is very musical and is involved in theater. It's still at 86,
Oh,
and
wow.
but yeah, so my dad was musical and didn't really own it, while he
Yeah.
was alive. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a complicated relationship with my dad, but music was our common ground with each other,
Mm, mm.
and I will forever be grateful for the influence he had on me as a music listener, especially.
Yeah, and I will say this about my dad, that while he wasn't a musician per se, he never discouraged me from following that dream. He was very proud that he had a son that could could play music. And you hear so many stories. I've heard so many stories from people who are talented, who early on had the bug to play and had parents who, the classic, you got to have a plan B, you got to have all that stuff, which I'm a firm believer that, to be a professional musician, like the only people who should do it are those that don't have a plan B. Like there's
Right.
this just, it's all or nothing. But my dad never got in the way of that. So I'm grateful for that.
That's wonderful. That's
Yeah.
great. I was listening to the recent recordings that you released.
Mm.
The etudes, fantastic. First of
Oh,
all,
thank you. That's a collaboration with this Israeli company called Artlist that just reached out to me a year and a half or so ago, and they have a very particular niche. They do a lot of, it's kind of like library music, but they provide a subscription service for uh, for music that's used up for, like, a lot of YouTubers have Artlist subscriptions and use Artlist music. It's, royalty free. That you get a subscription, then you get this
hmm
royalty free music. But they also do a lot of placements for big companies like Google and Apple, and so we just collaborated on one project, and I like how it came out as well. Those are fun little songs.
yeah, just and the piano sounds great. Did you record that at
I
your
did, yeah.
place?
That's my Steinway. There you can kind of, there she
Yeah, there
is.
it is. There it is. There's next to a drum set.
Yeah, that's the kiddos. That's the 16-year-old's drums and the 60-year-old's piano.
That's great.
Living in
I have
harmony.
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I have a son who was a percussion major in college and
Oh yeah.
is yeah. So I also played percussion, and when he started, I called my mom and said, "I am so sorry for the hell I must have put you through."
Yeah. Well, we built this house up here. It's funny you talk about, you told me about following your wife to St. Louis. We live way up in Northern California, in northern Humboldt County, where my wife is from. And
Okay.
and it wasn't exactly the same. We didn't make a decision to move here. We wound up here early in the pandemic, and this piece of land found us, and we wound up buying the land, building a house. But all that's to say, I built this lovely studio with a really thick door, so Luca can come in and just play to his heart's content, and to their heart's content rather, and we love hearing it anyway. But it's nice to have a space that's fairly soundproof.
Yeah, absolutely.
Drums are allowed.
So, yeah, drums are loud. Uh, when when did you move to California from? Because you were in Nashville before California.
Yeah, so the progression is, Boston first for college, 86 to Nashville for 20 years, '06 to LA for about almost 10 years, where I got married and where Luca was born, and then back to Nashville in 15, around about kindergarten, and then the pandemic, then the and the when everything shut down, it just sort of, everything went up for grabs. We took this big, I had everything canceled. I had a tour that canceled. We didn't want to stick around uh, in Nashville for the summer. So we rented an RV and drove to Northern California. We started in West Marin, where my father-in-law is, and then we wound up in Humboldt, where my mother-in-law is. And old friends showed us this piece of land they owned, and we just kind of fell in love. And one thing led to another, and so we've been up here about 3.5 years in a little town called Trinidad. Yeah,
That's wonderful.
yeah.
I'm sure the pace of life is slower, especially compared to Nashville these days. Wow, it's
Nashville's
crazy down there.
insane these days, and I go
Yeah,
back often. When I produce records, I go, and I'm going to go in May to teach a workshop and play a jazz gig, and so, I mean, I keep my connections to the community, but man, it's insane, it's intense, especially compared to the first time I moved there in '86. I'm that guy, like, oh, I miss the good old days. I'm
yeah,
totally that guy now about Nashville.
yes,
But the community, I'm just in love still with the community there of musicians. It's
yeah.
unparalleled.
I went to Belmont in the mid '90s, and
Yeah,
yeah, just the amount of traffic there compared to when I was there, it's insane.
yeah, it's yeah. And the unfortunate thing is the zoning, whatever it is with the zoning there, they didn't make the infrastructure. They're not keeping up the infrastructure to account for the bodies and the cars and all of that. So it makes
yeah,
it hard to get around there. God, Green Hills is just, it's mayhem.
It is complete mayhem. Yeah, I
Yeah.
used to live off of Woodmont Boulevard, so I'm
Yeah.
sure you're
Yeah.
familiar with
Oh
that part of
yeah.
the world. I
Yeah.
can't imagine what it's like now.
Yeah.
Um, so about 5 minutes before we jumped on this, I went and found this. So this is me in
Oh my gosh.
1987, I think.
Yeah.
And so my family took a family vacation to Nashville, and we were at the Nashville Palace and met Bruce Boughton because he was playing for J. David Sloan at the
Right.
Nashville
Oh my
Palace, and
gosh.
I think
Yes.
it was 1987.
Yeah.
Talked to Bruce about producing a project for me,
Yeah.
and we were talking about who all was going to play, and I looked at the credits. The late Martin Parker played drums on it. Russ Barenberg,
Oh my
all
gosh.
these great players.
Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I was all about Ricky Skaggs. I
Yeah.
mean, I
Yeah.
just loved him. So I
And
wanted Gary Smith to play on it because that's who I
well,
knew,
that was
right?
that band too, with Bruce and with Flack.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
what's his
Ray
first name? Ray
Flack.
Flack, who I was
Yeah,
pals with way back then. I mean, that was
yeah,
an amazing band, and Gary was
yeah.
incredible.
Gary was
Yeah.
incredible. So I remember Bruce said, "Okay, that's cool, but there's a young guy that has not been in town very long, and I would love for him to play on at least half of the record. His name is Matt Rawlings." And we were like, "Okay, let's do it." And lo and behold, you strolled in for the second half of the day
Yeah.
and you played on it and just completely. I remember I was a little kid, man, and I was just thinking, what in the world is happening listening to this guy play piano? It was,
Wow, 19
yeah.
and was I playing because there was a year maybe that I played with Jay at the Palace too. I did that gig with him. I don't know if it
I
was
don't, yeah, I
maybe it
don't
was a
think
little
you
later
were.
than then, yeah.
Yeah, he came to it was at Young and Sound. I'm not if you
Young
remember
and
that
Sound.
studio.
Sure, I remember right off a division there.
Yes.
Um
And he
Young
came to
and
the studio and
yeah.
hung out for a little bit that day. And
Ah,
I remember it like I was hanging out with all of my heroes that day. I still remember it like it was yesterday.
wow, and what a cool thing.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that was my one moment meeting you. So all of these years later, I mean, it's just a pretty crazy thing to think about.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So then I followed that name, that guy, Matt Rawlings, and then a few years later, one of my Christmas gifts was your MCA trio jazz
The
album. That was one
Master
of my.
Series Records, Balconies, yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about that record because I still listen to it to this day, and it was as a drummer, now a
Yeah,
bass player, but starting out as a drummer, the late great Carlos Vega, man. I
Carlos.
mean,
Yeah.
how did you work with those with Patitucci and Carlos for that
That
album?
that came about, my friend, I had become friends with David Hungate,
Mm-hmm.
legendary bass player,
Uh,
Toto, session producer. But I had started, I had started playing on records in Nashville and working for this guy named Jimmy Bowen, who was kind of the top of the heap of record producers at that time in the mid to late 80s. And like the band, his sort of go-to band was Eddie Bears or Larry London on drums, David Hungate, Billy Joe Walker, Reggie Young, Paul Franklin. And then I crept in, I snuck into this band. So I'm sitting there, this like, early 20s kid playing on records with Reggie Young, and David Hungate. It was, yeah, I mean, it's like talk about an education. So David and I became, and David and I both shared a love of jazz. And so we really connected around that. And then when I signed to the Master Series, I just went to David. I said, man, I need help. Like, help me make this record. So we co-wrote most of those songs together, and he produced the record. And so it was his connections. He knew Patitucci, and I'm not sure. Carlos started coming to Nashville and playing on records for Bowen as well. So I played dates with Carlos in Nashville, but I'm not sure about. I don't remember specifically the timeline if I already knew Carlos from that, or if that again was Hungate. But my instinct is that it was Dave's. Dave said, "Hey, this is the band I think we should cast for this." And then we went to LA and recorded at Mad Hatter at Chick's studio. You know, because
Really?
because Dave was an LA guy. I mean, he was in Toto. He was a part of that whole like '70s, late '70s LA session scene. With the Porceros and all those amazing Dean Parks. I mean, he was close, and also went to North Texas with Dean at the same time. And so he was deeply connected in LA, and he made all that happen. So we went out and Chuck Ainlay, who's really, a legendary Nashville recording engineer and producer, he came with us from Nashville and recorded it and mixed it as well. Yeah. So, yeah. And
Wow.
I was this little punk kid. I was so intimidated. I mean, but they, couldn't have been nicer. Both of those guys, John, Patitucci and Carlos. And then Carlos and I became better friends after that, just because he would come to Nashville. We would play on records together.
Yeah.
And I remember where I was. I remember the moment the phone rang. I was in my car, and and learned about Carlos's passing. Really horrible.
Yeah. What a total package of a drummer he
Oh my
was.
gosh, yeah, all of it. Yeah, exactly.
All of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I would say too on that record, I gave it a fresh listen ahead of us talking to each other, and man, Patitucci sounds so good on it too. It's some of the best
yeah,
playing I've heard him do, man.
yeah.
So good.
Relaxed and the chops and like I was heavily outgunned on that
Oh,
record, like
stop.
severely. But hey, you show up, right?
When you started playing sessions in Nashville, so were you what? You were 20? Is that
20.
how
No,
old
I
you?
moved there in '86. I'm 60 now, so I was probably 22, 22,
Yeah.
23. Really, when I really started playing on records. It started with
Yeah.
demos, but it moved to records quickly. I hit it timing wise. I hit Nashville at a great time, for my instrument, for what I brought musically. It was a good piece of timing as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
23.
Thinking of myself walking into a situation like that to bring the confidence that's required to do it, but not to come across as overconfident. What did you
Yeah.
have any of that internal thing going on?
I was pretty cocky, I think. I mean, I think I had the benefit of a young man's confidence, which is that, the notion that I would fail, that came later. but at that point, and so I'll also say this, we talk about J. David Sloan, just to historically contextualize that. When I was 17, I joined a band in Phoenix called J. David Sloan and the Rogues, and I worked for 2 years, uh, 5 days a week with J. David Sloan, as the front man of this amazing band at a place called Mr. Lucky's in Phoenix. Also in the band was Billy Williams, who was a guitar player, but like a local producer who had spent many years in Nashville making records as a musician and a producer. And I got, unbeknownst to me at the time, I got Nashville boot camp. We would learn 2 to 3 songs a week. So we would stay after hours on like Tuesday and Wednesday, and there were like 4 different singers in the band. So they would rotate who learned a new song. And every week, on Tuesday and then again on Wednesday, we'd learn a song from the top 40 of country music. And how we would learn it was they would play the song through the PA, and we would write number charts. I learned to write numbers. So I was getting this education, like exactly how records were made in Nashville. You listen to a demo, you write a number chart, you go in, you play, you figure out your part, and then you move on. So I came there with this that knowledge, and when I moved to Nashville, Billy Williams, he had great advice. Everybody knew I was sort of a jazz kid, and he said, "Hey, we know you can do all this stuff. When you get to Nashville, like you're going to enter a deep tradition of music that is not jazz, and so it's really important that you honor that." And for two reasons. Number one, because it's the right thing to do, and because the music, as the deeper you get into it, the more you're going to realize and appreciate how much mastery is required to really play this music. But the other thing is if you go into a session and start playing jazz, people are, it's really easy to get a label hung around you. And I knew guys like that in Nashville through the 80s and 90s that could play any of that country music, but somewhere along the line, the label of jazz guy had been hung around their necks, and they didn't get the work. So it was really great advice. And so I kind of went in armed with that bag of stuff, which gave me a leg up. And I also came to town after playing on Lyle Lovett's first record, which like became this thing that was not only great, successful, but also really intriguing. It was like outside of the normal Nashville, so there was like there was um, a cachet to it for me. So I had a lot of luck, and a lot of dominoes fell in the right direction for
Yeah.
me.
What great advice though that you could
Yeah,
it transcends all of that to,
yeah, yeah.
come in and honor who came before you, and and
Which is
and honor
advice
who's
that
in the room.
yeah, and which is advice I give students. I mean, I was mentored. There's a couple of really important mentors in my musical life, Billy being, maybe the top of the heap, and I try to pass on that stuff because it gave me a career. That, and in that band in Phoenix when I was 17 and 18, I learned how to play rhythm, and that's my career. Quite honestly, like I learned how to how to be in a rhythm, how to help. So I learned how to play rhythm, and I learned that the piano in this music and in most music is in the rhythm section. So and the concept of in the rhythm section, you're either helping or you're hurting. There's
Yeah.
no middle ground. And and that to me, that's 40 years of work right there is
Yeah.
rhythm, quite honestly. So uh, I learned it. I learned that from at Mr. Lucky's with those guys.
Yeah. When you work with piano students at all age and ability levels, do you find that the just we'll call it playing time,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
if we did you find that there's like a general deficiency to that you have to speak to with students?
Yeah, yeah. It's so I have a thing. It's actually it's a bit of a signature thing I've developed, and I call it survival tools for musicians, and it's three things: TFF, time, feel, and function. Those are the three. If you've got those three together, there aren't too many musical situations that you won't be able to walk into and not only survive but thrive. So time, which you just spoke to, um, is the inner metronome, and they're and sure, if you haven't worked with a metronome, if you haven't worked with drummers, if you haven't spent time, and there are some musicians that they just come with it. And I kind of was one of those people. My kid is one of those people too, but mostly not. So there are ways that you build your inner metronome. Feel is the big one to me, and time and feel work together, but feel is, and this is where I really uh this is the one that's missing most often, or that's deficient most often. And feel is the body. It's feelings, it's access and connecting, whether you're playing, listening, it's connecting the music to your body, and finding, and then that of course connects with your inner metronome. I mean, that's all. It's all sort of becomes one thing. But there's such, especially now in the TikTok generation, how do I get likes and eyeballs in 30 seconds? And the default is technique. The default is speed and flash, and which can be very impressive. But my funny little quip is, it if it feels good, the notes don't matter. If it doesn't feel good, the notes don't matter. So it's really all about, like, if you play something for me and I feel something, you got me. I don't even, I make all the mistakes you want. If I feel something, if it gets in my body and my body is moving, you got me. Right. And,
Yeah.
and and there's so much to that. I mean, that's, to me, whether you're playing solo, you're accompanying a singer, whatever you're doing, to a greater or lesser degree as a musician, you're always trying to tell your story, tell a story. So if I'm playing somebody else's song, I'm telling my story of that song, right? Uh, and all that stuff lives in your body. It's where your breath lives, and your breath is the one part of you that's in the moment. So this all comes down to, how do I actually show up in this moment to have a real time conversation, rather than, and I guess the difference is when you're playing from your brain, when you're really, which to me means that I'm shining my spotlight on me. I'm like, just, that's, I'm I'm having a conversation with myself, essentially. But your brain doesn't live in the moment. Your brain lives in the past and the future. Um, so that's a long-winded way of saying that's the big one that I find with students, I'm on a continual search of how to teach this, because it's different for everybody. Everybody's sort of doorway into connection with their body is different. Um, so I'm always searching for universal ways to sort of, turn that light on for people.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that, developing that inner metronome to then be able to have a musical conversation with other people that may have a good internal metronome or may not, to have
Yeah.
the flexibility to know how to, the give and take that goes along with that.
Certainly, and having great time doesn't mean I always play perfect time. It means that my reference is really that I trust. I have an inner metronome that I can trust, which means I can move, without fear. It's exactly
Right.
what you're saying. Yeah, because it is about a conversation, and I'm sure some of yours, many of my favorite records from the past, certainly there wasn't a click track, and certainly, sometimes, 10 bpm movement within but it's again, it's about the feeling. It feels good. The chorus speeds up, and it feels, yeah, of course it does. Listen to what's going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, what you say is true. It's all this stuff, and it's like, there's nothing wrong with technique, but for me, you build techniques so you don't, you're stocking your toolbox, and you know you don't use a hammer when a, chisel is required, or, I mean, you have a
Right.
toolbox so they're available, not so you pull them all out and, like, immediately start cutting shit up.
That's it. Yeah, it's funny you say that. Talking about listening to old albums, I've heard a few albums recently where I thought, I am so glad that this was not recorded with a click track, because it would have screwed this up.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
movement is what I think is what gives it a lot of what makes it great.
yeah, yeah. That's very true. There are legitimate reasons to use click tracks on records as a producer. Um, uh, uh, just depending on the situation. Sometimes, you're going to need to cut takes together, and without a click track, it's hard to do. Sometimes, you need to, like, replace the singer and the guitar at the front of the song where there's nothing else playing, and so there has to, things like that. But at the same time, I'm always game for, like, man, let's try this without. Let's see what happens. Just just having a performance happen, and
Yeah.
sometimes exactly like just freeing a band from the click, it just immediately blooms into what it's supposed to be. And conversely, sometimes you start that way and it's not happening until you lock it down, and then it gets great. So,
Yeah.
I think curiosity and flexibility are key to,
Yeah.
to this.
When you do solo piano recordings, do you record with a click very much, or do you typically
No,
just kind of just turn
no.
it on?
Yeah, I don't, I mean, no, I don't, definitely not. If I do a solo piano recording, I mean, I want it to be a,
Yeah.
a performance. I want it to be, again, telling a story. So
Yeah.
that it's all about following a feeling and not really knowing
Yeah.
where it's going to lead. I mean, I'll have the roadmap and the song, but then a performance is different every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recently spoke with Victor Kraus on here, and we were talking about him getting to work with Jay
Oh,
Bellerose,
yeah.
and uh, wow. And I described it to him. For me, it's almost like everything I love about Jim Keltner and everything I loved about Kenny Malone in
Oh,
one
God.
person.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. Plus,
And
yeah. Plus,
plus all of
plus
this
just
other
Jay.
stuff, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. And it's like approaching like a multi percussionist instead of a drum set and just what he brings. And I'm saying all that to say the duo
Yeah.
project that you
Yeah.
guys
Yeah.
did together just knocked me out, man. So good.
Eh, Thank you. That was such,
Yeah.
all those pieces were, 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 when we made the Mosaic record, um, which is all the duets with Willie and Lyle and all that. So that record, we cut all those tracks with just Jay and I and the artist live, and Jay and I in the same room, and the artist isolated. And so 99% of the vocals are all live with a few fixes, no fixes for Jay and I. It was all a performance, which was born out of he and I touring with Alison Krauss together. And we used to show up early on sound checks and just start playing. And one of us would just start something, and either I would start just improvising something, and Jay would then just start going, like start doing his crazy, or he would start a groove that would then spark me. And so this rapport and language developed between the two of us that led to eventually making this Mosaic record. Ed Cherney, the late great Ed Cherney, recording engineer, recorded Mosaic, and on every session we did when we were in between, and there were even some days where it was just the two of us, but when we were in between artists, we would just go out and play to the same way that we would have that we did on these sound checks with Allison, and Ed would record all of it. So the interludes record are all my edits of these little spontaneous compositions that just happened in between the recording of the songs on Mosaic. So that's how that record came about.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
It's so good, and it's I there's just so much, there's so much and so little going on. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. It's a good.
And yeah, it's just such wonderful playing, and just the sounds that he gets from all of
Yeah,
the, I mean, it's such a just a tour de force of playing, man. He's
yeah.
so
He's
good.
he's a he's absolutely one of a kind. Like Keltner, like Kenny Malone.
Mm,
I've got to play with both those guys on a number of occasions. Miss Kenny. He was a one of a kind. Kenny was
yes.
in the army. Um, and so he marched. He did like drum corps and marching band and stuff in the army. And so he had this magic trick he could do where he could hit, because all of the marches are at 120 or 60 BPM. So
Mm.
he could sit down at the drums and play 120 every time, like spot on to a metronome.
Really?
Oh yeah, that was like his parlor trick. It's really funny.
I
Yeah.
remember him. He came to when I was a student at Belmont. He came and did a master class,
Mm.
and just the talk about the toolbox. I mean, what he was. It was amazing to watch him
Yeah,
work.
yeah, and then the toolbox, but then just always in service of this music. He was so much about the body and the feeling. Just you would watch him, and it was just this like, he was. You could, I love musicians that when I listen to them, I know I can watch the music at the same time.
Yes,
Like that. Jay's one of those guys, um, and certainly Kenny was.
I remember him saying that he would many times on sessions he would prefer to have a lyric sheet
Oh yeah, yeah.
versus a chart.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Russ Kunkel is the same way.
yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And I think guys that have played with, and Kenny played with Don Williams for so many years. I mean, like who really have a long history with singer songwriters. Obviously, Russ with James Taylor, but those, and which is why Lyle. I think one of the reasons, and Russ is just a brilliant, amazing drummer. But one of the reasons Lyle loved playing with him so much is that he plays the lyric. He's not just playing the song; he's playing the story,
yeah,
which for a singer songwriter is that's like luxury.
yeah. It absolutely is, and just serves the song so well that you almost have to say. notice, oh yeah, there are drums happening right now.
Right. So
You get so
integrated.
lost in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
so integrated in it.
Yeah.
I speaking of singer songwriters, I've noticed over the years you how well I think you play with singer songwriters, guitar player singers especially,
Mm,
just that interplay between their vocal and their guitar,
yeah.
and that weaving that I feel like you consciously do
Yeah.
with
Yeah. Yeah.
with what they're playing. And um, can you speak to that a little bit about of just kind of that mental navigation of learning that?
Yeah. I think, I started, I met Lyle Lovett when I was in this band with J. David Sloan, Billy Williams, and Ray Herndon, Matt McKenzie, Jeff Boree, who we just lost. Um, we traveled to Luxembourg in 1980. Oh gosh, I guess it would have been three, maybe 1983. Anyway, we got this weird gig in the country. It's actually not a country; it's a royal duchy, if you want to get technical, of Luxembourg. And we played for a month on this strange show, this strange like big carnival they have, and they had a big American music tent. Lyle had been hired independently, and he didn't have a record. He was just this guy from Texas, singer songwriter from Texas, and he was kind of hired to play the set changes between us and this other band from big kind of variety band with horns and dancers that had been hired. And so we wound up kind of backing Lyle up, learning a handful of his songs and backing him up to give him a band for his sets, which would, and even back then, 1983, it was If I Had a Boat, Hot to Go, God Will, um, uh, Waltzing Fool, like there was just so many of those amazing songs were just already there, fully
Wow.
formed. Yes, really remarkable. But then that led to him, coming to Phoenix that following fall, recording a bunch of demos. Then I went to Berkeley. Lyle called and said, "Hey, I got a record deal in Nashville and a publishing deal. 10 of these demos we cut are becoming the first record. I want to fly you to Nashville." And that was my corner turned, which eventually found me living in Nashville. But so all that's to say is that playing, Lyle's songs, every one of them really, the guitar part, the tuning, the picking pattern, the part is an integral part of the song. You can't really separate it. And built in are these ebbs and flows in tempo that are also a part of the emotional, um, you know, content of Lyle's music. And so to play with him, number one, you got to hear it. You got to hear the guitar. And I developed radar. I developed this sort of sixth sense about, like, okay, when I hear his palm hit the guitar, that means the next beat is the downbeat. Like songs like what's the name of the song? I can't think of the name now, but there's a couple of them that are really almost rubato for the entirety of the song. They're these little sort of vignettes that happen, and so it's just this. It's like heads up, and so I that's really where it started. Was learning to listen really intently and listen really mindfully to Lyle, and then to like recognize cues, and which I think also was early development for me of this concept of I talked about, I think a little while ago, about attention. I like to look at attention as a spotlight, and so I can choose where I shine my spotlight of attention. And we were talking about young musicians. Many young musicians just naturally they learn all this shit, and spend all this time practicing, and the spotlight's going right on them. That's where it's going to shine. But especially from playing with singers, and also from playing with people like Lyle, guitarists, the more that I shine the spotlight on them and really consciously, mindfully focus my attention out, um, uh, I naturally I find my place in it naturally, because again, it's real time. When I'm doing that, I am in real time conversation, so I'm responding to what's actually happening. And so it's just like over time, I developed this muscle, of uh, uh, of response to this external, factor, so,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of it with pianists and guitars, a lot of it is, I mean, it's always, play less. So it's always subtraction. And, and like I said earlier, it's always about, I'm either helping or I'm hurting. And if I play too much, chances are I'm not helping.
Yeah.
So just like accompanying a singer, what my goal with accompanying a singer is, I want the singer to feel safe and supported, and never thinking, is he going to come in now? Do I come in first?
Yes.
Just being able to lose themselves in the song, and then I'm right there with them,
Yeah.
responding, having this conversation.
The As you're talking about that, I was thinking about, I think the title of the song is it Nobody
Nobody
Knows?
knows me.
Nope.
That's it. Yeah. I
That's
like
the one when
that's the one I was talking about. Yeah.
that's the one I
Yeah.
immediately thought
Yeah.
of, and it's
Yeah.
just like just the conversation between to me the conversation between the guitar and the piano on that track,
Yeah.
and then the vocal happening. It's yeah, it's such a lesson in less is more of what you played on that.
Yeah. And then what happens is, if I'm really focused on Lyle, there are little moments, like emotional moments happen where I have a response that's a deep emotional response, and something will occur, that so it'll bloom for a second. But that's not because it's predestined, or I've decided this is the lick I'm going to play, or this is exactly how I'm going to play it. It's in the best case scenarios, it's always as a response to what's happening, in that
Yeah.
moment. I never get it perfectly, but that's the goal. How it's like, it's, they say, get out of your own way. This is like a formalized version of me getting out of my own way, as much as
Yeah.
because it's amazing. My brain, I actually teach this too, and I call it 80/20. So I quantify, take 80% of your attention, 80% of your spotlight, shine it out, in a rhythm section, shine it on the groove maker, the drummer, wherever that subdivision groove is coming from. 80% goes there. The other 20% can cover everything you need to do. It can read the chart, it can play fills, it can play a solo. Like, it can do all of that stuff. Like, you don't need to focus on you. The more you focus out, the more it just, the more a conversation occur. And the point being, when we're having, I don't know what you're going to say next. So I have to be prepared to respond.
Right. And the
I,
difference between
yeah,
hearing and listening, right? Listening is
yeah,
an
it's,
active thing, you
yeah,
know?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're always hearing, but we're not always listening. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And she cried, man, how could you do it? And I saw that there weren't nothing to it. But nobody knows me like my baby. And nobody holds me. Nobody knows me. Nobody knows me like my baby. And I like cream in my coffee. And I hate to be alone on Sunday. And nobody knows me like my baby.
You've probably been asked this a million times, so I apologize for asking a million and one times. But
So,
what was the how did what was the origin for the intro to North Dakota with that Lyle tune?
yeah, I've been asked, maybe not a million, but a bunch, but that's a good story. So that was on Joshua Judge's Ruth, Ocean Way in LA, with George Massenberg, producing and engineering. And as happens on recording sessions, you run a song, you play a take, and then there's a little time in between takes, and sometimes musicians noodle a little bit. So I was, and I think noodling is okay. I think you have to have radar about if about recognizing if an artist or someone is tired of the noodling. I also think if you're in a vibe of a song, your noodling should be in that vibe. You should noodle in the vibe of the song. If you start noodling in some other vibe, it's really easy to break an emotional feeling and connection in the studio. It's a very delicate thing. So we were playing the song and I was in it and I just started playing this pattern just in between takes. And Lau said, Maddie, he calls me Maddie, he said, Maddie, what about that for an intro? Let's try that. And so it was all Lyle. He just heard this thing that I was doing, this pattern. And it was a, it was a pattern. It was like a physical, I just found this sort of, this pattern that this rolling thing
Yeah.
that felt good to play. And he heard it and said, let's try that for an intro. So that's how it happened.
It's so sparse, right? But
Yeah.
it's just exactly, it sets the tone for that tune, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It just is, very organic and that's to me that's the magic of the recording studio is, and that's how I produce records. I'm always, because I learned that so many times, not only in that situation but being a session player and having other producers exhibit a version of that, like awareness of that somebody in this, which is also speaks to the concept of casting. And in Nashville, casting a band for a record that was a big part of the producers I worked for. That was a big part of their process. So I learned that and it became a part of my process as well. And I cast people who I know, number one, are gonna get the music, are gonna stylistically bring the right sort of content, who are also going to emotionally, psychologically gel with the artist, but also who are going to bring ideas. Like I want, because I don't, I might have an idea of what I think the record should sound like. It's always going to wind up different and better because the guitar, I'm Tom Bukovac. I'm going to say, dude, play that. Like my idea sucked compared to that. Do that, right? And then they'll do that. And also, do you know Tom Bukovac?
Oh yeah.
So Tom is ridiculous, session player, guitar player, Nashville guy. And I've hired Tom to play on a bunch of records I've produced. And this is just an aside, but it's an illustration of the way Nashville record making, the freedom and collaboration. Everybody in that room, all the musicians, they're all arrangers and producers and musicians, and they all bring those brains to a degree into the room. So without fail, when I am producing a record and Tom's on the record, and I don't always play piano. A lot of times I like to sit, if it's not a quote piano song, but sometimes it is. So without fail, I'm sitting, I've come up with something, I'm playing the piano. Tom will walk over to the piano, like in between takes. He'll go, hey, Matt, love what you're playing, man. What about this? And he'll sit down at the piano and he'll play something that'll be like great. That becomes the intro to the song. The guitar player comes and shows the piano player how to play the intro, and which is fantastic. It's like, it's all about like, how can we just make something great? I don't care where it comes from, So
Right.
I've learned a lot from that guy. I've learned a lot about piano playing from Tom Bukovac. It's fantastic.
That is wonderful,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
That's great. And right, always everyone keeping their eyes on the goal of just
Yeah,
serving the
yeah,
project the
yeah.
best that you
Serve the
can.
song,
Yeah.
serve the artist,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Was it a natural progression for you to want to be a producer, or was that what led to you deciding to put that hat on?
Yeah, it completely natural progression for me. Growing up making records as a player in Nashville, and for me, it felt like I love making records this way. I want a bigger box of crayons. It
Hmm.
was kind of how it felt, which meant I need to be in the producer's chair so I can, because as a session player, I mean, my ideas are welcome, but I'm not going to. There is a line, and so it's still, I still have a role to play as a session player, and I need to stay in that lane. And as a producer, that lane gets a lot wider, and I wanted to go there and see what that felt like. So I just, I started doing it with local bands. I got the opportunity to produce Keith Urban's first solo record, and that really, kind of got the bug going for me. And we had a number one, and he won the Horizon Award that year, and it was good. It's a big deal. Um, and I love making records in any capacity. Um, I mean, sometimes I don't love it as much as, as others, depending on the song and the artist and all that. But just the process of being in this laboratory, and with our music and our wits and these tools we have, like creating something that lifts off the ground and becomes something that wholly new, and original. I mean,
Right.
it's art. It's making art. It's dangerous and exciting and risky and delicate, and it's what I live for.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and there's money on the line, and there's people's time on the line, and you're trying to do it
Yeah,
in the most efficient way
and
possible, right?
aside from that, and that's all true, and so the process of like forgetting that there's money on the line and people's time on the line, in order so that you can actually access feeling and then capture it.
Right. That's
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah, it's so, there's a lot of pressure. It's the greatest.
It's the greatest. I remember hearing that. I remember hearing that Keith Urban album, and I remember thinking, man, I felt like it was a very fresh drum sound for Nashville at that
Yeah.
time,
And that was
and
McHugh, yeah, Chris McHugh, who
yeah,
then
the
ended,
tones, yeah, it
yeah,
sounded
and
great.
he was like a rock guy. He came from like Christian rock and rock, and uh, and was a bit of an outsider. But I had started playing with him and loved him, so I cast that band for Keith, and also Justin Niebank, engineering, who was kind of a rock guy too, like not like an established sort of country. Justin came. Barry Beckett brought Justin to Nashville,
Oh, okay.
and so yeah, and then McHugh, wound up joining Keith's band, was Keith's drummer for a number of years after that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Uh, I wanted to talk with you just briefly. One of the things that I'm very inspired with you about is that we're now on a similar journey, and that I am now 6 months sober.
Congratulations,
I,
by the way.
Thank you. And I tell everyone, without getting, I guess I'll get a little personal here. I was sick of waking up on the weekends and worrying until my wife woke up
Yeah.
about what I did the night before and what
Yeah.
she was going to be angry at me about. And I just didn't want to live that way anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was kind of what led me to say, I just don't think I want to live this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I know that you've been down this, you're still on this path. And I just want to say, first off, what an inspiration you are in that respect too. And thank you for being vulnerable to the public about your journey as well.
Well, thank you. And I mean, yeah, and I've been sober 29 plus years now. Got sober in 1996 in Nashville, and it's an anonymous program, so I don't talk about anybody else in the program. But I am free to share that I'm a sober person in recovery, and so I'm happy to share that. And if there's somebody out there that needs to hear it, then I'm glad, and then I hope they do. I mean, all the slogans, I'm sure by now, but it truly is one day at a time. They call it a daily reprieve. So I get to wake up every day and I have a choice, of how am I going to use the tools at my disposal, which are very simple, which is humility and honesty, and making sure to not keep secrets. That's my big thing. So it's I know I've done this long enough that I know that if there's something I don't want to talk about, what that means is I got to talk about it. And thankfully, through recovery, I've got a bunch of people I can call and who need no other reason to pick up the phone other than it's me, and they know, okay, yeah, this guy needs somebody to talk to. But I think for me that you know a classic, I always thought that I really didn't know if I could play music without drugs and alcohol. So, and I'm here to tell you, 29 years in, like, life keeps getting better and music keeps getting better, and the more of the same person that I can be emotionally and mentally uh, away from the piano as I am at the piano, or vice versa. That's the goal: is to bring everything I have emotionally, all my vulnerability, all my fear, my grief, my joy, all that stuff that I've learned to actually access, that I was always afraid of, for so much of my young life. It turns out that's the good stuff. Like that's the gold mine. That's what I want to bring to music, and that also allows me to have relationships in my life.
I
and
understand
and
that.
so and relationships are hard, and they're supposed to be, but leaning in and learning how to bend, learning how to compromise, learning how to listen, learning that, we used to joke about, I'm the piece of shit that the world revolves around. Uh, you know, learning, just learning that I'm not either of those things.
Yeah.
I'm just a guy, and I'm an imperfect person, but I also am not a piece of shit. Hopefully I could say that in your podcast.
You
Uh, you
can,
know,
absolutely.
I have a lot of redeeming qualities, and then in recovery we talk about character defects, which is just the terminology used for you know uh, the traits that we're not as proud of, and but I don't regret any of them, and the more that I can own them and make friends with them, then the less they have control over me. So
Yeah.
yeah,
For me, I'm first of all, I'm thankful that I have a supportive family, a supportive wife,
yeah,
especially.
yeah,
And I tell everyone that she kicks my ass and she protects me from myself. And that's
yeah,
really
yeah,
but I will say, I think one of the biggest regrets that I've discovered over the past 6 months or so is how much of my musical life I feel like I wasted, or I wish I could go back
yeah,
and do over because I wasn't fully giving myself to it because I
yeah,
felt like I feel like I needed, to get hammered
yeah.
in order to do it.
Well,
It
just
sucks.
I encourage you to not spend much time in regret, because that's just another mechanism that I use to to be the victim, which was a huge part of my disease, was just poor me. And the bottom line is, every mistake I ever made got me right here, and I'm glad to be right here. So
Yeah.
I don't I'm not a trustworthy enough narrator of my own story to know that if I hadn't done that I'd be better off. I just don't know. And then the bottom line is, it doesn't matter. Here's where I am. I'm lucky to have today as a sober guy, and my life is pretty freaking great. So it's like, who's to say that every one of those things that I could easily get into regret about wasn't absolutely crucial to what is actually happening now. So I just encourage you to own it all, but don't beat yourself up. That's a slippery slope into poor me, and it doesn't do you any good. And the slippery
Yeah.
slope into poor me is the slippery slope into, maybe I should have a drink, and we
Yeah,
definitely don't want to
that's
go
right.
there.
We
So
don't want to go
yeah,
there. And
yeah,
I've been playing some music, and I'll tell you that I'm enjoying it now more than I ever have because
yeah,
I feel so present when I'm doing
yeah.
it, and it's so wonderful.
And you remember it the
Yeah.
next morning.
And I remember it the next day. I'm like, wow, I
Exactly.
wasn't a jerk yesterday. How
Bonus.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
And then if you are a jerk, then you have an opportunity to, own it and
Yeah.
make an amends, and be a
Yeah.
human, be a
It's a,
one of the greatest gifts of sobriety for me. I have a 16-year-old now, and I 29 years I've been sober their whole life. um I can't even tell you the amount of times I've apologized to my child about my behavior. Just honestly saying, I'm sorry. What I said to you, that was wrong. I snapped. That was all me. Had nothing to do, whatever it was. But the gift of that, like the way that I see my child developing as a human is just so powerful to me, and it warms my heart to see a kid who's grown up with imperfect parents who own that. I didn't have that.
right.
I did not have that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And yeah, what a valuable thing that your children, mine, I understand mine as well, not seeing you doing the right, they're not going to learn everything from seeing you do the right thing. It's how you handle yourself when you
Yeah.
don't do the right thing, right?
Yeah, and that you make mistakes, exactly, and then how do you repair? I mean, that's a huge thing, and that's I didn't learn how to repair until until I was well into my 40s. So, you know, it's a very valuable skill. I'll say
It
that
certainly is.
in life and music and everything, and definitely in parenting.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
certainly is. Before we go, Matt, I was just curious what's on the horizon for you. What I know you've been
Ah,
teaching some doing some
yeah.
online stuff for Berkeley. Is that right?
I've got so much going on right now. I do. I'm an online faculty member at Berkeley. I teach one course. I'm also now Berkeley's newest visiting scholar. So what that means is that I go to Boston 6 times a year, 1 week every month during their regular semesters. So I'll go February, March, April, September, October, November. And I go for a week and I teach lessons and do master classes. I do a 3-day production workshop where we pick a song by an artist who's a student, and we cast a student band and we make a record in one of their studios with me as the
Wow.
producers. And it's amazing. So that's the newest Berkeley thing. I've also, and pre-sales on this started yesterday. I have a brand new Artist Works. I don't know if you know about Artist Works. Artist Works.
Yes.
So I have a brand new Artist Works school, and it's called The Soul of Country Piano with Matt Rawlings, and it's a really extensive curriculum. And Artist Works is this amazing online education platform I mean, it's Brian Sutton, John Patitucci, Peter Erskine. It's just amazing. Alison Brown, incredible musicians that all teach schools. Guthrie Trapp is one of their biggest artists. One of the great Nashville guitar players. So that comes out in June, early June, but pre-sales started yesterday for that. So I'm really excited about that. And what they do, in addition to all the static content of the course, if you subscribe to a teacher's school, they have a thing called video exchange. So any student can make a video at any time, a short video of themselves playing, addressing a specific lesson, a specific technique, send it to the teacher. The teacher then, responds with a video. So there's this element of sort of private instruction baked in to the curriculum. So I'm excited. I'm excited that that's coming along. And then I've been playing jazz gigs. I'm producing a bunch of records. I've got a new record with an amazing gentleman from the UK that's going to come out later this year. And yeah, it's a full plate. It's it's a really different career than it was 10 years ago. But it feels just right.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you get to wear a lot of different hats,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I imagine it keeps things fresh. You're
And I
constantly
and
getting to
I
move
get
things around.
bored. I honestly, if I do the same thing over and over again, I just get bored. So it's perfect for me. I get I get to have a nice smorgasbord of activities.
Well, Matt, I can't thank you enough for just the time hanging out today and
You are.
talking to each other.
Thank you so much for having me, Brad. It's been a pleasure, and I can't wait to hear how you chop this up and make me look like a fool.
Challenge accepted.
Excellent, excellent. And use your
Well,
voice
thank you.
synthesizer and all that.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, best of luck, and thanks for all the great music throughout the years.
You're so welcome, Brad.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers.